Hey there, I'm Chelsea,
And I'm Nick.
and you're listening to the Forever Changed podcast.
On this podcast, you can expect to hear real conversations from Chelsea and I about how we have been forever changed by Jesus and how you can be too. We're so glad that you're here, and thank you for spending some time with us. We hope you enjoy. Well, hey friends, welcome back to episode number 4 of our 5-part series on things that we'd wished we knew before we got married. Today, we want to have a conversation with you about comparing your relationship and why it's dangerous. I think a lot of us have heard that comparing yourself is bad, and I would bet that most of us probably don't think in the context of comparing our actual relationship. Now, I do want to be definitive here. Whether you are single, dating, engaged, or married, this applies to all of us. I can think personally, one of the seasons in my life where honestly I probably was most guilty of this was comparing my singleness to that of my friends that I was around. Often a lot of my friends would go out and they would be on dates every week or every other week, and I just wouldn't. And I thought that I was like less cool or less loved by God or something because I didn't have somebody to go out with all the time. And so we want to talk about that today. We want to address it, why it is dangerous, why it's a bad idea, and
How to not do it.
yeah, really get into some of the real deal semantics of the conversation. And before we even really get into it, I just want to say from the top that we are not trying to fix you. We're not trying to repair you in some way as though you were broken and need to be fixed. We are simply trying to illuminate a topic and bring it to the front of mind so that you can begin to see it. And by seeing it, hopefully make choices to fight against it. And that's really the whole point of our time with you today on this episode. And so, Chelsea, why don't you talk to us rather a little bit about this and maybe how you experienced it individually and some encouragement that you can give to listeners, maybe from your own journey and then biblical truth as well.
Yeah, that's loaded. But I'll say, I think for women, which is our primary audience here, most of you are women, but hey to all the guys out there who are out there and just want to take this seriously. We're always talked about basically in the context of like, don't compare yourself to other individuals. Don't compare your life's work, your calling, your mission, your motherhood, whatever it is. And there's a whole other list for guys too. But when it comes to your relationship, I found myself, especially when we were dating and doing long distance, comparing our relationship to others that were living in the same city and got to see each other a lot. So I allowed jealousy to fester up in my heart, which then led to bitterness and led to resenting the situation I was in. Even though it was such a God-given opportunity to grow me and to grow us in our communication and in our love together, but I didn't view it in those moments like that. I was jealous, I was upset, I was like, why, once I finally found a guy that I could see myself marrying, am I forced to only see him once a month? And I found myself just getting really, really saddened by that. And then moving into when we moved to the same city, I thought that surely like there were no other couples. It felt weird to believe that like we were alone in certain struggles. You could talk about like sexually, you could talk about like not understanding each other as far as communication, like right off the bat. You're working out all of these different issues.
Yeah.
And you can feel alone because when you're living in a digital world, you're so distanced from all of these couples that in most scenarios, if we didn't have this phone or any sort of internet, we would never know those couples because they're probably states away,
Right.
countries away, maybe not even just like in our general vicinity. And that opens us up to an opportunity to either give into jealousy and comparison or to recognize that behind every relationship in person, there is an entire different story and situation and things that they're not sharing, and to have grace on yourself because you're probably not the only one going through that.
Yeah.
So I think each and every opportunity of like the transitional moments of our relationship gave me a different view of what that comparison looked like. And it kind of like morphed into different things. But now I would say I don't really find myself comparing our relationship to anybody else, just because I know that God has given us such assurance in what He's doing in our family that there's really no reason for me to anymore. Not anymore, like I should have done it beforehand, but I just don't see a purpose in it anymore at all. I
Sure.
know it can be like a stumbling block to lead to bitterness, and so that's kind of been like the traveling journey of what it's looked like as far as me and our relationship. I don't know if you experienced it differently, but you could
Of
probably talk about
course.
yours.
No, I mean, let's be real. We all have. We've all been on Instagram or a blog or whatever it might be, and we've seen that couple traveling to Spain and then to Greece and then to here and then to there. And you're like, man, I wish that was me. What content creators honestly won't tell you a lot of time is that they intentionally have curated their brand, so to speak, around their relationship, and they've made their relationship something that people want to identify with or that they hope to be like, and that's how they garner the following. They have a ton of people following them who want to be like that, and they think that in
Mm,
following that person, that as though that is somehow step one into becoming that kind of person and or having that kind of relationship, and really it's just not. That brand was intentionally created with that end goal in mind. And that's a lot of what you won't hear. The other thing I wanted to mention is that comparison, specifically garnered towards relationships, whenever we begin to get in these mindsets of, oh, I wish I was like them. Oh, I wish my girlfriend or my fiance or my whoever was like that girl or like that guy. Then a lot of times, I would say almost all the time, what that ends up doing is it removes any gratitude that we actually have in our heart for our significant other.
mm,
And that's a really dangerous thing because then what you begin to notice when you start saying, I wish that I'm just going to use Chelsea for example. I wish that Chelsea was like this person. Well, then what that ends up doing is it makes me look at all the things that are quote unquote wrong. Nothing is wrong.
or sin.
Yeah, or bad, or not appealing, or whatever it is about my significant other. When all along, this person probably has a lot of different things going on in a different capacity. I guess, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that I could look at Chelsea and then look at this person and
Mm,
say, I wish Chelsea was more like this person. Whereas the husband of this person might look at Chelsea and be like, I wish that my wife or girlfriend or whatever was more like her or had,
mm,
her heart or had
yeah.
her hair or whatever. And so it's this circular thing that until we really get a
Mm,
grasp on it, it's just going to continually be perpetual,
yeah.
and it's going to end up hurting a lot of us. And honestly, I can't say this with definitive accuracy because I'm not a relational psychologist, but I think by just the process of deduction, you can look at a lot of relationships where people have cheated, where there's been infidelity or lack of faithfulness, and you can really start boiling it down to there was at some point where someone put their eyes on someone else and began comparing that person to the person that they were with, and they made some conscious decision that this person would be better than who I'm with. And man, that's really dangerous. That'll get
Yeah.
you in a lot of trouble really quick. And also, it's not how we were designed. It's not how your heart was designed. And so
Mm,
I'm not going to go too far into the weeds, but
That's okay, because I had another thought.
I think that we would be wise to ask the Lord for a content heart.
Yeah.
And not content is in a way that you are settling. Because when I look at Chelsea, I don't ever feel like I've settled. I feel like she settled, honestly, a lot of the time. And so, thank God though for it. Sorry you settled. If
Oh
you
my
think that you
God.
settled, but no, seriously, I don't look at my wife that way, and I don't think that any healthy relationship would say that, oh, we look at our significant other, in that light, like, oh, you can improve on this because this person's doing this, and you would be, that's just not a good
Yeah.
idea.
Hey friends, if you're enjoying this podcast so far and you have not yet ordered your copy of Marriage Minded, we believe because you're listening to this episode, you would really enjoy and gain insight and wisdom from that book. Nick and I went back and forth in each and every chapter, sharing from our experience and also wisdom from older couples, scripture, and collective advice on how exactly you can know that you're with the one. So it's 10 ways to know that you have found the one. And that phrase can sound a little bit like, oh, there's certainly only one person out there for me, but that's not what we're getting at. What we're getting at is 10 biblical principles and ways to know that you are walking in the path that God has designed for you in your relationship. So if you've not yet ordered it, or if you've already ordered it, hopefully these podcasts go along with all the things that you're learning there, and it just kind of complements more of what you're learning. So we hope you're blessed by it, and thank you for supporting our podcast. And with the rise of a lot of different groups of like social media platforms, even allowing popularity around like romance novels, for example, we have Book Talk. I don't know if you guys have known much about this, but there was a stat that came out last year in 2022 that said that the rise of like YA, like young author romance fiction novels, like skyrocketed because of
Yeah,
TikTok.
it was like 16%,
Yeah,
which is huge.
It's crazy, and I just remember as a young girl reading a ton of romance novels and just getting super kind of enticed in the story, and it's addicting. It's
you-
like really enjoyable.
And you put yourself in the story.
Right. So where I'm going with this is recently, the past couple years, I recognized a behavior in myself when I would read a novel like this, where if there was a ton of romance and it just seemed like such a perfect story, I would look at my marriage and my relationship and be like, why doesn't my husband do this and this? Why doesn't, why don't I see this in my life? And that's where I think it's similar to the starting to view flaws in your person that you love. And once you highlight that and you just dwell on it, the enemy will use that as a door to
Wedge.
like just illuminate everything that's bad, everything that's even remotely not good, or whatever it may be. And you can't ever see the good in your person anymore. And so I would just be wise and discerning of even the information you intake, the movies you watch, the books you read. There's a lot of books and movies that you're probably watching out there that you shouldn't be. And I'm just saying that because I know, like, as let's just say we're sisters right here. Like, it is so important to guard your eyes so that it doesn't get into your heart. I had a friend recently, just a couple weeks ago, she was sharing with me that the Lord gave her a dream about not watching Pretty Little Liars anymore a couple years ago. And I know that sounds funny, but the way that he gave her that dream and kind of unpacked why she shouldn't watch that show, she was like so thankful that God would illuminate, majority of Hollywood and entertainment is not for the Christian. Like, and there's a reason for that. We get desensitized to certain issues that we shouldn't be desensitized to. We think certain behaviors are normal when in fact they are actually very alarming and very harmful and sinful and could lead down a very terrible path. But it could also potentially set up your relationship to really struggle and create harm and just distrust in a way. So I just wanted to point that out because I think the Holy Spirit was illuminating that to share with you guys because there's just a lot of like lack of discernment and wisdom when it comes to what we watch and what we feed ourselves because it will get in if you continuously allow yourself to believe and kind of subscribe to all of these different stories and narratives that people are selling. There's a reason that some of these authors are number one New York, Times seller bestsellers on the list for like weeks in a row because they're gaining popularity with the world. But are we really supposed to jump on that bandwagon? There's probably some stuff in there that you shouldn't be agreeing with. And if you allow it in your life, you're agreeing with it. So I would just say, like, just be really, really discerning because like we care so much about your heart and like you continuing to fight the fight and like having a healthy relationship and having a healthy life.
Yeah, we've also begun to think that a lot of the Christian morality and Christian ethic is somehow degrading to society, which is utter nonsense. You'll hear a lot of the debates back and forth on was America founded as a Christian nation or was it not? My answer and conclusion is that no, it is not, but was it influenced highly by Christian ethic? Absolutely. And did it create the best freedom experiment that's ever been created? I think so. I mean, I really do. And so Christian ethic in this country has at least created something beautiful. And the further and further and further and further historically that we've strayed from that, the worse and worse and worse and worse things have gotten. So when it comes to your relationship, the closer that we can stick to Christian ethic, to biblical ethic, what that actually looks like, what that actually lives like, your relationship is going to improve overall. And I think that this is one of those big, big places that we can begin to really work on and really think about effectively and immediately. So, like
Yeah.
you were saying, why doesn't my husband do this? As I read it in the Nicholas Sparks novel, those were huge when I was in high school, and also Pretty Little Liars was like a fad. It was like the fad show that all the
Yeah.
girls would watch. And then also, this is just total side note. Do you guys remember the scarves? The scarves every girl would
Infinity
wear in
scarves.
high school. I guess I don't know
Yeah.
what they're called, but every girl had them. Anyways, besides the point. Throw out your scarves if you have any.
No.
Um, yeah,
Unless you like them.
I mentioned that to mention this. I mean, there's a reason that those books are on the fiction shelf. Real life does not always look like a romance novel. Real life does not always look sexy. We seem to forget the part in the Hallmark movies about where the wife, the single mom slash ex-wife, widowed wife, had her husband shot at war, and like he's dead now, and now there's this new guy. Like we forget all the hard stuff, and we just immediately go to like the very cute little Instagrammy window and
Mhm.
focus on that, and we think that that's how the extent and all of life should look. And it just doesn't. And when we put that, this goes back to episode 1. Whenever we put that expectation into our mind and we begin looking at everyone else's relationships and then creating this fantasy, like we talked about in that episode, in our heads, then we just get into a mess of trouble.
Yeah, and I'll say, I think it's important to know that, like, yes, all of these things are good. Like, all of these things we're talking about with the episodes that we're addressing with you, they're healthy and they're good. But unless the Spirit of God illuminates these things to you and you lean into Him as He guides you, like, you'll feel like this is just kind of religious practice and like it's
Mm.
just another thing to do, another thing to check off, another thing to like
Right.
feel pressured to accomplish. But do not feel that pressure. Like, if anything, just allow this to be a conversation that illuminates a train of thought in the back of your mind to where when you enter into conversations, you talk about these things with the person that you love, or you reflect before you even start a dating journey if that's something you want and desire. Just allow God to truly be your helper. He has given us his Holy Spirit to guide us and to help us. And so
Mm,
I don't know where I would be if I just viewed the Bible and all of these topics as just something to cross off and feel obligated to do. I think that's why we see a lot of people stray away from following God, is because they have kind of minimized faith down to a works rather than an active journey where God is lavishing his love
mm,
on us in the process. And he gives us these instructions to kindly invite us into a journey with him, and with other people, like with you. I get to
right.
journey with God with you, and that's just such an exciting thing. So just be excited about that as you're learning all of these things, uh, it is not lost on him that uh, you are searching, and that you
We're
are
desiring.
desiring
Yeah,
to
you
do
want,
this.
right. It's good.
And he will help you and guide you and even illuminate things that we don't say and Marriage Minded doesn't talk about, because he is your specific helper. What is
Hmm.
needed for you might not be needed for me. What is needed for Nick might not be needed for another guy out there. And so, thank God we have somebody to fill in the gap. Thank God we have a God that cares so much about the details. And so I
Right.
just wanted to say that because I'd never want you guys to feel like we're just listing off these things that you need to do. Like, you need to not be jealous. You need to not
Sure.
um, compare yourself. Like, we'll illuminate these things, but God is your helper. He cares so much about your heart,
Hmm.
and he doesn't want that life for you because it will be harmful, and he doesn't want you to live in a life of harm. He wants you to live in freedom. So,
You don't have to do any of these things. You are not obligated by any law or structure to do any of these things, but you get to do these things. This is not something that the rest of the world has access to. You have access to the Spirit of God. If you would call yourself a follower of Jesus, you have access to the Spirit of God that now lives within you, and He empowers you. He gives you the ability to not look on other relationships with a comparative eye. He gets to give you, you get to receive a heart and a mind that is content, fulfilled, and uplifted by the current relationship in which you occupy. And that is a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful thing when you are friends, when you are family, when you individually can live a life not comparing yourselves to other people, to other individuals, but also in other relationships as well. You get to accept the full joy. You get to receive the full joy that your individual relationship offers and brings. Is it always going to be easy? No, it's not always going to be easy. When you see another couple who is relative to your age in Morocco, doing whatever, and then maybe you're laid up in the hospital having some sort of a procedure. That's tough. That's really hard. But looking at the grand scheme of things, zooming out and looking at, it could be switched in 5 years. I could be traveling across the world and I could have another friend who's laid up in the hospital. And so, you know, just this comparison dance that we often walk through is just such an interesting, and it's such a difficult concept and topic to grapple with extensively and absolutely. There's no one size fits all answer that's going to address your individual proclivity to maybe or maybe not compare yourself or your relationship. We can't sit on a podcast and possibly answer all of your questions, but we know one who can, and he is within you. And so really our hearts is to say, hey, we've illuminated this issue. Now go and wrestle this to the ground individually or collectively in your relational context with the Lord, and ask him to give you the content heart that you need. Ask him to give you the peace that you need. Ask him to give you the assurance and security that you need in your individual relationship to carry on in the days ahead. So we hope that you enjoyed this episode. We hope that it was helpful to you, that you found something of value and benefit in it. And so we cannot wait to see you in episode 5 for a final installment of our 5-part series on things that we wished we knew before we got married. We'll see you there.